Welcome to Debate the News True Crime. I'm Joseph Lobosco, joined by my amazing co-host Adrienne Barker. Tonight, we'll be doing a deep dive on a disturbing and high-profile mystery, the 2022 death of 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson. What began as a birthday getaway to Cabo San Lucas with friends turned into an international controversy after she was found dead under very strange and mysterious circumstances. The case went viral when a shocking video surfaced showing Shanquella being viciously assaulted by one of her travel companions, contradicting the friend's initial story that she died of alcohol poisoning. It's a case that has raised questions about international justice and why, even now, no one has been charged with Shanquella's death.
And I'm Adrienne Barker. Before we begin, a warning to our listeners. This episode involves discussions of violent assault and death, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. We approach this story with respect for the victim, Shanquella Robinson. May she rest in peace.
And a quick disclaimer, Adrienne and I are not attorneys, law enforcement officials, or medical professionals. We research each case thoroughly, but this show is recorded live with minimal editing. Any factual errors are unintentional. Any individuals we discuss who haven't been convicted of a crime are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News.
Now, let's dive into the timeline of the death of Shanquella Robinson.
25-year-old Shanquella Robinson traveled from Charlotte, North Carolina to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico on October 28, 2022 with a group of 6 friends to celebrate one of their birthdays. Less than 24 hours later, she was dead. On the morning of October 29th, Shanquella was brutally assaulted by one of her travel companions in their luxury villa, an attack partially captured on a cell phone video. The footage, apparently filmed by another friend, showed a nude Shanquella being thrown to the floor and beaten on the head, while a male voice can be heard saying, "Can you at least fight back?" Yet no one intervenes.
And according to a timeline later documented by investigators, the altercation took place between 7 and 7:30 a.m., after which Shanquella, dazed and injured, retreated back to her bedroom. And for several hours, there was no obvious signs of trouble until around midday when a housekeeper discovered Shanquella unresponsive, lying face down on the bathroom floor. At about 2:15 p.m., the group of friends finally called for medical help, telling the doctor on call that Shanquella had drunk too much alcohol and needed an IV for dehydration.
When a local physician arrived around 3:15 p.m., Shanquella was alive but in distress. She was minimally responsive and clearly dehydrated, according to the doctor's report. Shanquella's condition rapidly deteriorated. She suffered a seizure and then went into cardiac arrest at approximately 4:49 p.m. Efforts to resuscitate her failed, and Shanquella Robinson was pronounced dead at 5:57 p.m. on October 29, 2022. She had been abroad with friends for barely one day. The friends, however, told a very different story about what happened.
In the immediate aftermath, Shanquella's travel companions, they hastily arranged to return to the United States. And on October 30th, 2022, the day after her death, 3 of the friends brought Shanquella's luggage back to her family home in Charlotte. They offered condolences to her mother, Salamandra Robinson, and they claimed Shanquella had died from alcoholic poisoning during the trip. Mexican authorities initially seemed to relay a similar account to the family, suggesting that Shanquella's death was due to alcohol intoxication. However, mounting evidence soon contradicted the friends' story.
On October 30th, local Mexican medical examiners had in fact conducted a partial autopsy on Shanquella's body. Their report noted signs of head trauma and concluded that her cause of death was severe spinal cord injury and atlas luxation, essentially a broken neck. This finding was recorded on Shanquella's Mexican death certificate, with the manner of death indicated as violent rather than accidental. Meanwhile, Shanquella's family grew suspicious because the friends' claims did not align with what they were hearing from Mexican officials.
And their worst fears were confirmed in mid-November 2022, when the disturbing cell phone video of the assault leaked onto social media and then quickly went viral. The footage showed Shanquella brutalized by one of her supposed friends, later identified by witnesses as 26-year-old Dejanhi Jackson. And I apologize, I may have that name wrong. While others in the group watched, public outrage exploded as the video spread. And Shanquella's family realized she had likely been beaten to death, not alcohol poisoned. And they began calling for justice, demanding that investigators get to the truth of what happened in that villa.
Spurred by the video evidence and the autopsy findings, Mexican authorities in the state of Baja California Sur launched a full homicide investigation into Shanquella Robinson's death. State prosecutors quickly concluded that her death resulted from a direct attack, not an accident, and they identified one of Shanquella's female traveling companions as the primary aggressor. On November 21, 2022, Baja California Sur's Attorney General obtained a warrant for the arrest of Dejanhi Jackson, the woman seen viciously beating Shanquella in the video, on charges of femicide, which is a gender-based homicide. By that time, however, Jackson and the rest of the group, often dubbed the Cabo Six, had already fled back to the U.S. in the immediate aftermath of Shanquella's death.
Mexican officials did not let the matter drop. They filed an extradition request asking the United States to hand over the suspect to face charges in Mexico. Under the U.S.-Mexico extradition treaty, Mexican prosecutors needed to outline the evidence of Jackson's culpability and the applicable charges. Mexico's request, delivered through diplomatic and legal channels, it indicated that an Interpol red notice was issued for the suspect and formally petitioned the United States government for her capture. By late 2022, the case had clearly become an international legal matter, and the world now knew Shanquella Robinson's death was being treated as a possible murder, and the pressure was on for U.S. authorities to respond.
In the weeks following Shanquella's death, the FBI's Charlotte field office also opened an investigation working in parallel with Mexican authorities. Agents interviewed Shanquella's acquaintances and collected evidence on U.S. soil while coordinating with Mexican prosecutors. Newly released FBI case files, obtained via a FOIA request in 2025, revealed that as early as November 9, 2022, just 11 days after Shanquella died, a man walked into the FBI's Charlotte office with information he believed was relevant to what he called Shanquella's murder.
And around that same time, an unidentified caller also contacted the FBI's tip line, and they described an altercation at the Cabo Villa, stating that, in quotes, Shanquella died during the incident, though the caller admitted they were not sure exactly what happened. This tipster did provide several chilling details. They claimed Shanquella hit her head on the toilet during the fight, and they believed there were 2 security cameras inside the vacation property that might have recorded what occurred. The caller also said that they had seen photos of Shanquella's body and observed bruising, noting that, in quotes, there are bruises on her, and she looks like she was stomped on.
As the FBI pursued leads, Shanquella's body was returned to North Carolina, and U.S. authorities conducted their own independent autopsy. On November 17, 2022, the Mecklenburg County Medical Examiner's Office in Charlotte performed a full post-mortem examination of Shanquella. The second autopsy's findings starkly contradicted the initial Mexican report in critical ways. Notably, the Charlotte Medical Examiner found no evidence of any spinal cord injury or atlas, neck, luxation. They claimed Shanquella's spine was intact. This was in direct conflict with the Mexican forensic report that had pointed to a broken neck as the cause of her death. The U.S. autopsy did uncover other injuries, though: a bump on Shanquella's head, subtle brain swelling, bruising, and signs of brain hypoxia, which is damage from lack of oxygen due to cardiac arrest.
However, the American medical examiner could not conclusively tie these injuries to a specific fatal trauma. And because Shankila's body had been embalmed before the second autopsy, a consequence of the 2 week delay in the international transport, some of the forensic evidence may have been lost or obscured. And in the end, the Charlotte autopsy declared Shankila's cause of death, in quotes, undetermined, noting that while a blunt force head injury had occurred, it was unclear if and how it directly caused her demise.
This discrepancy between the Mexican and U.S. autopsies proved to be a pivotal factor in the case. Mexican authorities stood by their conclusion that Shanquella died from a violent attack. Their death certificate even estimated that the interval between injury and death was approximately 15 minutes, implying she succumbed quickly to the neck and spinal injury. Yet the U.S. investigation suggested Shanquella had survived for several hours after the fight, ultimately dying of cardiac arrest with no broken neck. These conflicting forensic conclusions created significant doubt on the exact cause and timeline of Shanquella's death, complicating any potential prosecution.
By early 2023, Shanquella Robinson's case had become a high profile matter, with calls for justice coming from the family, the activists, and even diplomats. And in March of 2023, attorneys for the Robinson family, and by the way, civil rights lawyers Ben Crump and Sue Ann Robinson, sent a letter to President Joe Biden at the time and the State Department urging intervention. And they implored the U.S. government to either extradite the suspect, the Hanny Jackson, to Mexico or take over jurisdiction to prosecute the case domestically, citing the available evidence and the egregious nature of the crime. The letter criticized the lack of progress, noting that U.S. officials had given the family little information.
On April 12, 2023, U.S. federal officials from the Department of Justice and the FBI met with Shanquella's family to deliver news that left them devastated. The officials announced that, after an exhaustive investigation, no U.S. federal charges would be brought in Shanquella Robinson's death. The DOJ's attorneys explained that they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime had been committed under U.S. law, largely due to insufficient evidence from the autopsy and investigation.
And in a public statement, the U.S. Attorney, Dina King of the Western District of North Carolina, and the U.S. Attorney, Sandra Hairston of the Middle District, noted that experienced federal prosecutors and FBI agents had reviewed all available materials, and they concluded they could not support a federal prosecution in this case.
Essentially, the conflicting autopsy results and lack of a clear cause of death made it almost impossible to pin criminal liability on any specific person beyond a reasonable doubt. While the viral video showed a vicious assault, prosecutors struggled with the fact that the U.S. autopsy did not definitively link that beating to Shanquella's actual cause of death.
So, with no U.S. charges filed, the woman whom Mexico charged remained free on American soil. The extradition stalled, and although the Mexican prosecutors had issued an arrest warrant and they even activated the Interpol alerts for Dejani Jackson, the U.S. evidently determined that the legal threshold for extradition was not met.
American officials maintained that if any new evidence emerged, they would be ready to re-examine the case. But for the time being, both prosecution in the U.S. and the extradition to Mexico were off the table.
On October 29th, 2024, the 2 year anniversary of Shanquella's death, her family took action in civil court. Salamandra Robinson filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, against all 6 of the travel companions. The suit alleges that those friends were responsible for attacking Shanquella, causing her death, accusing them of battery, negligence, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Notably, the lawsuit also names the U.S. Department of State and the FBI as co-defendants. It claims these agencies acted negligently in handling the case and even accuses the FBI of withholding crucial investigative records that the family had sought via FOIA requests. The civil action aimed to at least hold the Cabo Six accountable in a courtroom, even if criminal prosecution could not.
As the wrongful death lawsuit proceeded in the United States court, some of the Cabo Six began to respond publicly and contentiously. One defendant, identified in court papers as Imani Dejani Green, who had apparently legally changed her name from Dejani Jackson after the incident, filed an amended answer to the lawsuit in May of 2025. In her response, Green denied wrongdoing, even asserting that any actions she took were in self defense. She also asked the judge to dismiss the case against her on procedural grounds, claiming she was not properly served with a lawsuit due to her name change and that the North Carolina court lacked jurisdiction. This was a startling stance, given that she was allegedly the friend seen pummeling Shanquella in the video.
Meanwhile, the federal government fought to extricate itself from the civil case. On June 13, 2025, a U.S. District Court judge in North Carolina partially dismissed the family's lawsuit, ruling that the claims against the U.S. Department of State and FBI could not go forward. The judge's order meant that Shanquella's family could not sue those agencies for how they handled the case. However, the lawsuit against the 6 individual defendants, the Cabo Six, was allowed to proceed. By mid-2025, the wrongful death case was poised to enter discovery and possibly a trial, keeping Shanquella's story alive in the courts even as the criminal side remained at a standstill.
3 years have now passed since Shanquella Robinson's death, and the lack of criminal accountability, it remains a source of anguish for her family. Mexican authorities still consider the matter an open femicide investigation. But without the suspect in custody, their case cannot advance. And in the U.S., federal officials stand by their 2023 decision, absent new proof. And as of late 2025, no arrests have been made against anyone for the attack that allegedly killed Shanquella Robinson.
However, the Robinson family's civil lawsuit is still moving forward, and Shanquella's family remains hopeful that sworn testimony, discovery of digital evidence, or internal contradictions exposed during the civil proceedings could reveal new facts. Facts that might finally be strong enough to revive a U.S. criminal prosecution or meet the legal threshold for extradition to Mexico. In a case defined by one brutal video and a mountain of unanswered questions, that may be the last realistic path to new evidence. For now, her parents and supporters are left with only partial answers, pressing forward in hopes that someone will eventually be held accountable. If you have credible evidence about the death of Shanquella Robinson, you can contact the FBI Charlotte, North Carolina field office at 704-672-6100. Alternatively, you can submit a tip online to tips.fbi.gov.
What a story, Joseph. Tonight we are live on Chatter Social. We invite you to download the Chatter app. It's free. Get it on your app store. Come into the room. We are very excited tonight on Chatter to have our founder and someone that we all love, Nelson. Nelson, we're so glad that you're here today. And if I remember correctly, I was in the room when you helped to raise money for Shaquila's family. So we would love to hear your thoughts about the case and why you felt compelled to raise the money for her family.
I remember when we first heard about the situation, I think we all heard it in a room together about how she passed in Mexico, heading down there with a group of friends, and the important lessons that we learned from that situation. Not everyone you necessarily call your friend is actually your friend, because we also heard about how they moved and acted after the death. It was a crazy story. And I think in regards to how money was raised, for the situation, it just happened to be something that happened live in a room. It's, a lot of people, probably hundreds of people in the room at the time. Somebody brings up the situation. We research it live. People are commenting in the chat, and we're all discovering this situation ourselves, right? Organically, in that live moment. And I think it was Grant Cardone, he comes up, he's like, dude, let's do something, for this again in that live moment. And for those of you guys that were in there, everyone's just like, yeah, I really want to do something. I really want to do something. And I think somebody in a room found a GoFundMe link set up by the family. And they put that up there. And all we did was just galvanize the crowd to act. And people pulled money out of their pockets. I pulled money out of mine, and we all contributed. And the purpose of that was to help the family with whatever they needed at that specific time. So the burial, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't think we were going to raise as much as we did, but we ended up raising well into, $100,000+. I just don't remember the number off the top of my head. It's been quite some time. But yeah, it was a touching situation. It was organic in the way that we ended up helping that family. And, it shows the power of community, right? So glad to be here. Glad that you guys are having this conversation.
Nelson, if I remember correctly, was it at another time that the mother came on to say thank you?
It was definitely Nelson who was able to bring in the mother. And then a few days later, somebody brought Ben Crump in to the room. The money that was donated to the GoFundMe was to bring her back from Mexico because that cost money as well as the burial.
Yeah, I remember it was a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot. And I remember Grant Cardone in the room was like, he would match whatever we were able to raise. And, it blew past 10,000, and he only threw in 10,000 because it was too much to match. And I think I remember John Ledger, former CEO of T-Mobile, he came in. I think he probably did maybe 25 or something like that.
And I want to say it was her aunt that came on stage with the mom. And I don't know why. Don't quote me on that, but there were multiple family members.
Yeah, it's multiple things with this story, right? It's number one, good people will always help, right? As long as they're aware of whatever's going on. That's something that I learned. Number two, you really have to be careful with your kids and the company that they keep, the friends that they have, right? Because this was a situation where she was literally killed by her group of friends who then tried to cover it up after the fact. I think that was what drove a lot of us crazy, right? The fact that I think two of them or something, they flew back earlier than the others. They went to the mom's home and, hey, we're sorry, but then try to spin it at the same time. It was crazy.
I think what was difficult about this case too, I mean, we're using the word friends loosely. They aggressively came after her. It's not like there was an accident and something happened and they were trying to cover it up. They went for her. It was horrible. And I think that's frankly part of the reason we raised so much money because I mean, everybody in the room felt so bad for that family. As far as they knew, their daughter was going off to somewhere with people she'd be safe with, and they were the very people who killed her. And it was really awful. But I think our community did really great in terms of responding quickly and supporting the family.
For a whole community to come together, like stop what they're doing live in the moment and raise that much money. I mean, it had to be a powerful, heartfelt situation. And that's exactly what this was, right? It caught everyone off guard and no one could believe it. I couldn't believe it, you know? And I remember back then, we probably spoke about it for maybe a week to 2 weeks afterwards, hoping that they would catch the criminals. And, of course, like everything else, we move on to other events. And to be here now, almost 3 years after the fact, and hear from you guys that they never arrested anybody, that to me is nuts. I'll be real with you. That is crazy. So I didn't know that. I just heard that from Joseph. To hear that they never arrested those criminals is crazy, right? And yes, it's just very unfortunate. The family doesn't have closure. You know what I mean? And I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
Just one point of clarification. There is an arrest warrant out for one of the women, the one caught in the video in Mexico, but the U.S. won't extradite her because of the Mexico-U.S. extradition treaty. The U.S. doesn't feel it rises to that level. There's an arrest warrant for her, and there's an Interpol alert for her, but she's happily sitting in the U.S. where nobody can touch her.
So Mexican authorities are the ones that are looking to extradite her from the U.S. to Mexico to face the law in Mexico. Is that correct?
That is correct. She's been charged with femicide, which is female on female murder.
So she's a fugitive living in the United States. I mean, what the fuck is going on? Like, if this was the other way around, we will bust in there and take that. We literally just went into Venezuela and got the president. So forgive me for my goddamn humor at this point, but why aren't we just giving her to Mexico so she can serve time? Or matter of fact, why aren't we charging her on our shores and putting her to jail? She killed a U.S. citizen. What are we talking about? Right? So what's the legal analysis there?
Okay, so first of all, as we know from the Natalie Holloway case, you cannot charge her for a crime that didn't occur on U.S. soil in the United States. She's not a fugitive because she left Mexico to come home. And then after they finished the autopsy and their investigation, they issued the arrest warrant. And they sent out the click to Interpol. Ben Crump and attorney Robinson, which is not related to this family, sent a letter to Biden asking for him to do what was right and to extradite her back to Mexico.
Well, that's some dumb shit. So basically, I could jump on a flight with a group of friends. We're all U.S. citizens, and we go to fucking Colombia, and I can shoot every one of them in the head, fly back to the U.S., get charged in Colombia, but live in the U.S. scot-free, essentially, is what we're saying.
No. Well, we don't have the same type of extradition treaty that we do with Mexico.
Replace Colombia with Mexico.
Essentially, it has to meet U.S. probable cause standards before we'll even consider extraditing someone. And because there were two autopsies and they're conflicting, it's not a case that they think is going to hold up over in Mexico. So if there was a video of someone stabbing her to death and she died of stab wounds and a medical examiner is going to go on the record and say that's what killed her, that would be a different story. But because it's kind of a gray area that they can't prove 100% that assault is what directly caused the death, they're going to be apprehensive to hand her over to Mexico.
So we can go to Venezuela and pick up the goddamn president, but somebody can murder a U.S. citizen, right? And they don't get held accountable because of bullshit standards. Let me keep it real with you, right? If Trump wanted to damn any extradition treaty on the planet Earth, he would do just that. If we want to get somebody for committing a crime, okay, we would do just that. So the way I see it, that family deserves justice, okay? Exceptions can be made. Exceptions are made all the time. That family deserves justice, and it's a shame that the killer is living, breathing, walking scot-free for committing murder on someone else's child. That is disgusting.
To your point, not only the killer, but the accomplices. It's not like who she was with is a mystery or uncertain. They have video evidence on their phones. I get your point, Shauna. I understand. There's got to be standards. There's got to be some kind of framework and foundation for extradition. But, my question, I didn't know that there was a conflict over the autopsies. Can anyone speak to that?
The Mexican autopsy report says that her spinal cord was severed and her neck was broken and her death was within 15 minutes. The tox screen that was done in the US as well as the blood alcohol in Mexico came back negative for everything. The US autopsy, which you can just Google it and it will come right up, out of North Carolina. It's 19 pages long. Says that there was no injury to her spinal cord. There was no broken neck. She was covered in bruises from her feet to her shoulders, her arms, her thighs, her inner thighs. Like, it's all documented on this autopsy, and those little, they have the funky picture. It's an anatomical, it's actually a male, but it's like you put X's where everything is. Her skull was not broken or cracked. She had a huge bump on the front of her head. One of the things they found that was left out in the intro was a brownish red substance, most likely vomit, that she might have choked on as well. The doctor who was there trying to give her an IV, when the quote friends finally called a doctor, that's when she started convulsing and passed within about 20 minutes.
Basically, she died a horrible death. And it's an absolute shame that the killer and the accomplices aren't being held accountable. By the way, did Joseph and Adrienne, do you guys have any updates on the killers and the accomplices? Are these guys on Instagram living a good life, going to college, hanging out?
So they are on social media. They're actually working and living, and some do have private accounts from what I've heard. Some have scrub profiles after the case went viral. It's very hard to see that they are absolutely living their lives while this case still has no criminal resolution.
Right now, the family is going after all of them. They are either in the discovery phase or about to enter that phase. There is still hope to get some justice because in this civil case, they're going to have to get deposed. They're going to have to answer a lot of tough questions. They can, in discovery, try to get a ton of evidence that maybe the police didn't have access to or the FBI didn't have. So it's possible that through this civil litigation, they can uncover some evidence that can then be turned over to the FBI to maybe make a case for them, charging them here for something, or potentially enough evidence to rise to the level that they might reconsider extraditing them. So the fight's not over yet, but right now it's still in litigation.
Wow.
I think what's going to end up happening is that because it's a civil case, a lot of stuff will come out, whether or not the FBI subpoenaed their phone records and their data from their phones and all of that. Hopefully it still exists, that they're going to be able to get it, and that's going to show a lot more. But if it shows that the FBI didn't do it, that means they didn't properly do what they were supposed to do, which will then pull them back into the case. So there will be depots, there'll be requests for documents, everything, and they're going to have to turn that over or face penalty. In a civil case, when you don't do things, you get a monetary ding, but if you don't pay the monetary ding, you can be held in contempt and you can be put in jail. I believe, having read as much I could this afternoon that Joseph sent me, as well as doing my own digging, I do believe that in discovery, I think they're going to find some interesting information that is going to help get her, because there's only one girl there's an arrest warrant out for. There's no accomplice or anything else right now in Mexico. I do believe that somehow this is going to change, and perhaps this could turn in her mother's favor, and maybe they will send this woman back to Mexico.
So basically, like from the family's perspective, the goal of this lawsuit is to uncover the truth, not necessarily get a monetary judgment, because they're not going to get a damn thing from those 6 individuals, correct?
That is what I suspect, because really right now that is the only path realistically that they're going to have to actually get an extradition or charges in the US. So I suspect that's what they're doing. Yeah.
So what's your call, Joseph? If you had to toss a coin right now, what do you think's going to happen over the next 18, 24, 36, 48 months?
If I'm being honest, I think it's a really tough case. I don't realistically see this being prosecuted in the US. I don't realistically see them extraditing them. Because of the 2 autopsies, like I mentioned, they completely contradict each other, and any defense attorney for any of them is going to seize on that. The FBI also released over 100 pages of documents. I wasn't able to get through all of them, but I read through some of them. And in the early stages of the investigation, there was some miscommunication or issues with Mexico. They weren't handing over the autopsy. They actually had to send agents to Mexico to retrieve it. Initially, they said that they had not done a toxicology screening for the alcohol poisoning. Then someone else said that they did do it. So there's just a lot of stuff that a defense attorney can use to try to shut it down. And I think that prosecutors are going to be apprehensive to even go there unless they have concrete evidence. I do think, though, with this administration, they're very unconventional. I do think there is a world in which they can make enough noise about this case to catch that administration's ear and potentially compel them to extradite her. That's a long shot, but I think, that's possible.
Sean, in your professional opinion, in a situation like this, will there be any attempt to reconcile the differences of the two autopsies?
So, as a disclaimer, I am not licensed to practice in North Carolina. So, I do not know the ins and outs of the laws of North Carolina. I just want to make that disclaimer. In my opinion, not professional, just in my opinion, I do not think that the discrepancy will matter that much. I think that this is a wrongful death, and there are other factors involved that will point to their negligence and their intentional acts of not getting her help fast enough. So I think that, yes, the defense will rely on the discrepancy, but the fact that the housekeeper at this villa found her at noon and they didn't call for help until 3:15, that it's in itself shows bad judgment because the housekeeper found her unconscious in the bathroom and non-responsive.
Wouldn't the greater issue be, though, that they caused the injuries? I mean, it's not just about they found someone who was incapacitated and they didn't ask for help. They caused the injuries to begin with.
Well, yes, that's all the stuff that has to be proven in a wrongful death. It's not just the autopsies that's going to be brought forth in this case, it's some of the other things as well.
That attack took place between 7 and 7:30 a.m. and had those friends not left her in the condition that she was in and gotten her medical attention immediately, she probably would be alive today. And I think that is what they're going to be arguing in the civil trial. I don't see any world in which any of them are going to win that, especially not the one who assaulted her.
And also, when you look at the video, she was in bed and was dragged out of bed and circled by the friends while this other woman just beat on her and beat on her. And at one point, she's literally just slumped over. So I don't know how she got from the bedroom to the living room, back into the bedroom to the bathroom, based on what we see in the video.
So this is Debbie. First, my question is why, when the housekeeper came, didn't she call for medical attention when she clearly saw that this young girl needed help? That's my first thing. My second thing is that all of these Cabo Six, how are they living with themselves? How can you watch somebody be beaten to death and live with yourself? Like, why haven't any of them come forward to say what really happened? How do you go to bed at night knowing that you took a person's life, you watched this person die, and you can go to sleep at night? I can't fathom that.
Debbie, they actually visited the mom, so it doesn't surprise me. If you have the nerve to actually do that, you're probably sleeping very well at night.
They're disgusting people then.
Yeah, they went to the mother and said that she had drank too much and that she had died of alcohol poisoning. And I believe one or two of them had dinner with the mother, were there with the family quite a bit until things started to come out of Mexico. And then there is an interview, you can Google it, of her mother and her father. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, talking about what these individuals did as far as coming to the mother's home and the lies that they told and how upset and angry they were. So there are interviews all over YouTube that you can watch because there was a full media blitz on this back in 22.
Yeah, and what's crazy is the male friend who's standing there video recording her as if he's at like, a wrestling match or something. This wasn't like a two-way fight. This was someone who was completely incapacitated, could not fight back, was not trying to fight back, that was just getting beat on. And this guy is filming it and he says, at least try to fight back. Like, it's just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I've been on many drunken, crazy vacations with my friends. Never has anyone ever gotten into a physical altercation. I don't understand it. These people were definitely not her real friends. A real friend would never allow that to happen and record it.
And it was about 6 weeks after the incident. While at school, he played the video for a bunch of people, and that's how the video got leaked. Is somebody must have like recorded it or screen grabbed it, or I don't know how it's done, but somebody got a hold of it while he was showing it to people. And that's what then started the chain of even more push for justice. So it was like this guy was almost bragging about it. It's disgusting. And just a reminder on the timeline, she was not even in Mexico for 24 hours before this happened. I mean, what on earth did she do that night that at 7 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 in the morning, she was dragged out of bed and the shit was beaten out of her?
Exactly. And even if she had done something to upset someone, physically attacking someone, especially in that manner, is just completely an insane way to resolve a conflict. There's no justification for it whatsoever. I'm interested though, now that they're in the civil trial, I think at least one of them may have come forward to the FBI. I don't know for sure. There were definitely 2 informants that came forward in the early days of the investigation. One of those may have been one of the Cabo Six, but the rest of them seem to be kind of keeping quiet in lockstep with one another. I think now that there's all this money on the table and they're facing the possibility that they're going to have to be making potentially restitution payments for the rest of their life, I'm wondering if maybe they'll start turning on each other. And I think that would be the best case scenario for the Robinson family, because then if they throw one of them under the bus, maybe they can get enough information from the people who were there and witnessed it to maybe make a case.
I think that somebody will trip up. I really do. They're not going to be able to get their stories that specifically straight. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's conscience finally gets to them and they really do talk about what happened.
I would love to know, do you guys think that it was premeditated? When I first heard the story, I absolutely, in my mind, thought that they knew exactly what they were going to do and it was premeditated. And the worst of it is not only did they steal a life, but they got away with it.
For now, they got away with it, Adrienne. Maybe not forever.
True, true. I don't think it was an accident either. I don't think accidents happen that way.
I'll be honest, I thought I knew the conclusion. I haven't followed the case, and it never occurred to me that justice hasn't occurred for this family and for her. And it's hard for me to imagine that you could get all those people to agree on this action without some kind of premeditation. It just seems improbable.
I agree, Anne. The fact that they all kept quiet, or at least the majority of them kept quiet and stuck with this one story, at least in the beginning, yeah, there definitely had to be some premeditation. Because usually, when you have a criminal conspiracy, the more people involved, the quicker it falls apart. Because usually someone cracks. That didn't seem to be the case here with the majority of the individuals involved. It's almost like an I Know What You Did Last Summer type situation, or like that TV show, How to Get Away with Murder.
Lord of the
situation.
Flies.
Or Lord of the Flies. So there was definitely some consciousness there collectively with this group, in my opinion, allegedly.
Well, Chatter family and our listeners, this case has been a long, agonizing journey. 3 years of pain, perseverance, and the pursuit of truth. And tonight, we really did revisit every twist and turn, from a friend's luxury vacation that turns deadly to an international fight over jurisdiction and a family's unyielding quest for answers. Shanquella Robinson's story, it doesn't have the resolution anyone hoped for. Instead, it stands as a stark example of how complex and frustrating the path to justice can be when a crime crosses borders.
Thank you for joining us for this in-depth episode of Debate the News True Crime. We aim to not only inform, but also spark conversation about the justice system, media coverage, and the human stories behind the headlines. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Debate the News True Crime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. You can also join our live audience on the Chatter Social app and share your thoughts. You can download it, Chatter Social, in the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. And a special shout out to Nelson Apega, who stopped by tonight. He is the founder of Chatter Social. I'm so grateful that he showed up tonight and gave such great insight on this case. And shout out to the entire community that helped him raise all of that money for this family. That really is one of the reasons why I'm even aware that this case existed. I had never heard of it. And because of that fundraising and people talking about it, this case was suggested to me, and that's why we're covering it, to get the word out there. So until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and take care of yourselves and each other. This is Joseph Lobosco with Adrienne Barker signing off. Good night.